an incredibly challenging time for everyone, and there's a lot of demands on your time just now. So it's great that so many of you are able to join us today. This is an area that's very close to my heart as well. I lead on learning for sustainability and outdoor learning within Education Scotland, and I also lead on science and STEM. So when the PISA results come out, that's definitely an important point for us when they come out every 3 years. And it was lovely this year as well as getting information about science and so on through the PISA 2018 study. This time around, it had a sort of focus on global competencies, which links in with my learning for sustainability and outdoor learning remit. So there's some really interesting findings in there for us. There's definitely a really good news story for us. And I'm really grateful to Keith for all the work he did to analyse the data from Scotland, and also really delighted that Keith's been so keen to work with us to share that sort of good news story more broadly across Scotland. So Keith is the Principal Research Officer within Scottish Government. Keith is going to lead off this afternoon, and we're going to do a pause, maybe a couple of points through Keith's presentation, and I'll give you an opportunity just to ask some questions. We'll have a bit of a discussion, and then we'll progress on to learning for sustainability and the COP26 summit as well. And I'll do the same. I'll lead a few slides and we'll pause for some questions and for some reflection to give you a chance to breathe and pause through those presentations. So I'll just hand over to Keith just now. And Keith, if you just want to start presenting and take us off and some of the key findings from PISA 2018.
Okay, thank you. Can I check that you can hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. Thanks, Keith.
And can you see the presentation on your screens?
Yeah, we can see the presentation. It's not a full presentation mode, but we can see the presentation just now.
Okay. Is it changing slides at the moment?
It's not changing slides just now. Nope.
Okay. I seem. I have it on presentation mode. Is it changing slides now?
Yeah, you can change slides that way. So if you just maybe enlarge that as big as you can, that'd be great.
I have to excuse my technical skills. Okay. Great. Hope you can see that. Okay. First of all, thank you very much.
I think if you try and press go to press F5, I think it goes to present mode. I think.
F5 just does mute on my phone.
There's a way laptop. You can do it. It doesn't matter. But I remember a shortcut, but I don't know if it's design or home, and you can present it. It should be fine like that.
Okay, well, hopefully this will work for now. But yeah, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I think this is Ian and I's fourth double acts for an Education Scotland presentation. I think I've been kicked out of the presentation twice now, so hopefully we'll not go through a third technical mishap. So as Ian mentioned, I'm Principal Research Officer in the Learning Analysis Unit in Scottish Government. A big part of my role is managing the PISA project, so both running the sort of operation of it, managing the contract, and then analysing the results. So what I'd like to do today is take you through the results in the Global Competence Assessment, but importantly try to link that back to the Curriculum for Excellence and learning for sustainability as well, so we can see how it links in with the curriculum. So we make a judgment on that. I'll also take you through what PISA actually is and how it operates, and I suppose pose a few questions on what I think we maybe could take forwards or questions for you to ponder as well. So as Ian mentioned, it is a good news story. So normally when we talk about PISA, it's normally a bad news story. You hear how Scotland's plummeted down the rankings, even if that maybe isn't the case, and how we've done worse than the last time. But actually for this one, we did very well. So you can see here's a few headlines. Scotland's school pupils deserve praise for their global competence. So I'm saying, Ted's saying we ranked 4th in the Global Issues Study among 27 nations, and we're among the top performers in the new PISA test. So as we say, this is a good news story. But there's a lot of interesting things behind these results. So I hope to be able to get these over in this presentation. So a quick overview of what PISA is. So PISA is an assessment of 15-year-olds of their skills that are carried out by the OECD. It runs every 3 years across all OECD members and a few partner countries. We've been in all 7 surveys since the first wave of testing in 2000. And every survey cycle focuses on one of 3 domains as the major domain. So that's either reading, maths, or science. So for this one, reading was the main domain, with maths and science as the minor domains. And alongside this is always an innovative domain. Last time it was collaborative problem solving. This time is global competence, and the next time it's going to be creative thinking. It's a huge study, probably the biggest of its kind in the world. There are 600,000 students from 79 different countries took part. In Scotland, we commissioned the National Foundation for Educational Research to undertake the assessments on our behalf. 107 secondary schools took part. That's a third of secondary schools in Scotland, and just under 3,000 students successfully took part in the assessment. So what is global competence? There's quite a long definition, which is a multidimensional capacity that encompasses the ability to examine global and intercultural issues, to understand and appreciate different perspectives and viewpoints, to interact successfully and respectfully with others, and take action for collective well-being and sustainable development. So how do they measure this? So they do it in 2 ways. So there's a cognitive test that measures people's sort of knowledge and skills, and a questionnaire that looked at students' awareness of global issues and cultures, their attitudes, the information they get from schools, and also teacher and head teacher viewpoints on global competence. So how does this link to curriculum for excellence? So we look at learning for sustainability here. In the italics, our learners are committed to the principles of global citizenship, social justice and equity, democratic participation, and living within the ecological limits of our planet. So the definition we just looked at for global competence really fits in well with learning for sustainability. And looking at the CFE in particular, we look at one of the capacities. I forget which one, but these are the bullet points underneath. Respect for others, commitment to participate responsibly, knowledge and understanding of the world, ability to make informed choices, ability to develop informed ethical views of complex issues. All of these fit really well under global competence. So we can see that global competence really fits in well with what we're trying to understand about the curriculum. So you can see from this map the 27 countries or economies that took part. These were in the dark green. These are the dark green ones are the ones that took the test and the questionnaire. So you can see countries like Canada and Spain and South Korea all took part in that. And then the ones in the lighter green are the ones that took part in the questionnaire only. And you can see from that the main ones that didn't take part were the USA, the rest of the United Kingdom, though Ireland did take part, and Scandinavia as well. So what did the results tell us? So looking at the assessment first, students were given a number of different scenarios that they had to evaluate, and they had to weigh them up and be able to sort fact from fiction. At the highest level of proficiency, students are able to analyse and understand multiple perspectives, able to examine and evaluate large amounts of information without much support from the question, and be able to effectively explain situations that require complex thinking and extrapolation. So the format itself always starts with a scenario. So PISA always starts with a real life scenario in the form of case studies, and then the tasks are measured from there. And after that, it's a series of either multiple choice or open-ended questions. So how did Scotland do? So typically, PISA measures against an average of 500. So that's what they tend to aim for as an average score in each assessment. So Scotland's score was 534 for this. When you compare that with maths and science, which were about 490 for Scotland, and about 505 for reading. So we outperformed ourselves in this assessment. So we're one of 4 countries that were at least 50 points above the average. Only 2 countries, which were Singapore and Canada, had an average score that was significantly higher than Scotland. 2 countries were similar, Hong Kong and Chinese Taipei, and 22 countries were lower, including Korea and Spain. An interesting point was that girls outperformed boys in every single country taking part in the assessment, with the exception of Scotland, where performance was statistically similar, so more equity in Scotland. And we can see that 12% of students in Scotland were at the highest level, level 5, compared to only 4% of students across all countries. And this chart shows us quickly how we compare to other countries. So you can see to the left of the first line, Canada and Singapore were above Scotland, Hong Kong and Chinese Taipei we were similar to, in all the countries to the right were countries that were statistically below Scotland. An interesting measure here as well is actual versus expected scores. So for this, you take the actual scores in reading, maths and science and extrapolate that to a score that you'd expect to get in global competence, all things being equal. So the countries closer to the line are the countries that performed as expected. Countries to the left of the line, such as Russia and Korea, performed significantly below expected. And countries at the top to the right of the line, including Colombia, Canada and Scotland, performed significantly higher. So this shows that even taking into account performance elsewhere in PISA, we outperformed ourselves effectively. So we outperformed expectations. So I'm just going to pause at this point and see if anybody has any questions on the assessment or test part of global competence. If not, I'm happy to keep going. I think the most interesting parts are still coming. Can I just check? You still hear me? I'm not just talking to myself?
I can still hear you, Keith. Yep, loud and clear.
Okay. I was just checking I hadn't been talking for 20 minutes to the screen.
No, it can feel like that, though, can't it? You do, it's fine.
I do. No, great, thank you. So this is the student questionnaire. So this asks students a series of questions about their attitudes towards things like immigrants, respect for cultures, their interest in other cultures. And then what this chart shows is a set of indices based on the questions. So for example, all the questions on attitudes towards immigrants is turned into an index, and then that's compared against the average. So for this chart, 0 marks the OECD average, so the average for all countries. So the blue boxes are where Scotland had a more positive view based on the questionnaire, and the red boxes are where we had a sort of more negative view than the average on each of these. So we can see things like attitudes towards immigrants and respect for other cultures and awareness of global issues. Scotland's students' view of themselves were above the OECD average. Looking at the other end, student interest in other cultures and perceived self-efficacy were significantly below the OECD average. We can break this down by things like gender. So you can see here, boys are blue, girls are red, and this is against the OECD average again. So you can see that respect for other cultures and attitudes towards immigrants, girls in Scotland had particularly positive views on both. Boys still had positive views, but not nearly as much so as girls. The only thing that boys were more positive on was self-efficacy and student awareness, though there wasn't a significant difference here. Girls tended to have a more positive view than boys on most of these measures. There was actually a report that came out on Monday on the differences between girls and boys internationally in global competence. Apologies for this slide, it has a lot going on, but I literally picked this up half an hour ago and have put it in here. But in most countries and economies, girls report having higher awareness of global issues, but lower self-efficacy towards those global issues. Girls had greater ability to understand the perspective of others, greater awareness of intercultural communication, and greater agency regarding global issues, but lower propensity to take action, though in Scotland, girls actually had a higher propensity than boys. They found that boys are more likely than girls to participate in activities in which they are expected to give and discuss their views, while girls are more likely than boys to report participating in activities that relate to intercultural understanding and communication. And as conclusion, they said that girls should be empowered to take an active role in more participatory learning activities, and boys encouraged to participate in activities focusing on intercultural understanding and communication. And that's to foster more positive intercultural skills among boys and boost girls' self-efficacy. And just quickly looking at other measures, so we can measure this by social background. So you can see from left to right, the blue is SM, well, I'm saying SMD1, but it's actually the OECD's own measure. So this is based on student responses to the questionnaire. So the perceived student background. So the green is perceived most advantaged and the blue is perceived least advantaged. And you can see there's a kind of gradient sloping up towards the most advantaged. But what's positive is that respect for other cultures and attitudes towards immigrants was positive across all the different backgrounds in Scotland. But you can see here that self-efficacy, it was only the most advantaged that has a positive view on their own self-efficacy, and that as you go down the sort of social backgrounds, you get less self-efficacy. We can compare it to English-speaking countries. So these are Australia, Canada, Ireland, New Zealand, and Scotland for each of the different measures. And you can see there's quite a lot of similarities here. In respect for other cultures and attitudes towards immigrants was very positive across all the English-speaking countries. It's a bit different when we compare it to European neighbours. So this is France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and Scotland. I've done it a bit differently here as I've grouped the indices by country. So you can see huge differences between Italy and Spain. Italy tends to have a pretty negative view on other cultures compared to other countries, whereas Spain had universally positive views on both themselves and other cultures. Scotland has a higher, I suppose, awareness, respect for other cultures, and respect for immigrants than we did in France, Germany, and Italy, which was a positive. Looking at individual questions, we can look at what students feel they're aware of. Students were very aware of equality between men and women. We were the country that had the most positive views on our understanding of the causes of poverty. Out of 50 odd countries, we were the most positive. However, we were less likely to say we were aware of issues such as global health, which did include pandemics, interestingly. And given this was in 2018, this was taken, we can safely assume that we know more about global health now. Respect for other cultures, we can see across every measure, Scotland was above the average in terms of how we respect other people from other cultures and things like values and opinions. The same is true for attitudes towards immigrants, about immigrants having the same rights as everyone else in the country, having the right to vote, having the right to the same education. We're above the OECD in all of those. However, the opposite is true in interest in other cultures, in that we're less likely to want to learn how people live in other cultures. We're particularly less likely to want to learn more about the religions of the world. We're not quite sure why this is, but this did seem to be similar across all English-speaking countries, which is interesting in comparison. On global mindfulness, it was a bit of a mixed bag. We're actually more likely to think of ourselves as citizens of the world than other cultures, but we're actually less likely to think that our own behaviour can impact on people in other cultures, and less likely to think that we can do something about the problems of the world. And lastly, we're less likely to think that looking after the global environment is important to us, though still 7 out of 10 young people did agree that was important. Looking at actual actions, or the capacity to take action, we were less likely on most of these measures to actually take action, including reducing the energy that we use at home, boycotting products for ethical reasons, or participating in activities in favour of environmental protection. We were less likely to say that we had done so. However, we're a lot more likely to keep ourselves informed about world events. So just taking a break there, does anybody have any questions on the student questionnaire responses? I know there's a lot to take in there.
Keith, I think it's just the self-efficacy measure is quite startling, and I suppose not a surprise, but it's quite sad. Given that the whole thing is very positive, that still gives us a bit of work to do.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And it's interesting that the test scores, the assessments actually came out as that we have a very high awareness and ability to sort through these complex problems and answer these questions. So it's almost like if we gave the results back to students, they might feel that actually they do know these things and would have higher self-efficacy.
Interesting.
And particularly girls were very positive about themselves, but had very low views on self-efficacy.
I think that for me, Alison, is a really important point. I also oversee the work of the Improving Gender Balance and Equalities team in Education Scotland. We've got a team of 6 officers, and that's one of the big fundamental things that we're having to address in the system is about girls' self-efficacy and how their confidence in relation to science and STEM and progressing into science and STEM careers. So I think once again, PISA on a couple of occasions has told us that very powerful message that self-efficacy is a big issue for us in Scotland, particularly for girls. There's this strong fear of failure I think we have to overcome.
Yeah, absolutely right, Ian. The main PISA assessment really found that fear of failure was a big thing for girls in Scotland and across the UK. Internationally, Scotland and the UK were far higher for the fear of failure. So I suspect that plays into the self-efficacy argument here as well. Okay, does anybody have any other questions on this? Okay, I'll just carry on.
David Maxwell has a question here. Is self-efficacy broken down into subheadings similar to the other competencies just shown?
That's a good question, and it will be. I'm happy to have a look at that properly and send it on. Apologies, I haven't got it in front of me here.
No, sorry, Keith. I just thought that was useful because that's the first time I've seen some of those headings above broken down into real detail, where you've highlighted in yellow, obviously the ones that we stick out a little bit, just because I suppose my question was similar to Annette's there around self-efficacy, and just have to tease that out to explore. I know you mentioned there, the one I wrote down was that fear of failure, but which other aspects are within that self-efficacy heading that might be worth a conversation and might be worth exploring? Because I certainly would find that useful. Thank you.
Okay, happy to do that. It should be in the report itself as well, but I'll have a look and forward that on. Sorry, I can't see if people's hands. I can just see my own presentation at the moment, so do let me know if anyone's got their hand up. Okay, so we also took part in the teacher questionnaire for the first time as part of PISA, and that did ask teachers about their own beliefs on multiculturalism and global competence and how they teach it in schools. We haven't included much here, but actually teachers were even more positive about immigrants, other cultures, discrimination than even the pupils were. So actually the teachers in Scotland were had very high levels of global competence compared to teachers in other countries, which is a positive thing. And teachers in Scotland felt as very prepared, or at least as prepared as the average country on teaching in multicultural and diverse classroom. However, students reported that they were less likely to undertake learning activities at school that promote global competence than the OECD average. And I should say it's learning activities and lessons, which maybe is a difference. We also found from teachers that they were less likely to include global issues in their lessons and to have undertaken professional development in these areas as well. And so there's a bit of a contrast there between students' performance in the test and their self-awareness of what they know on global issues, and the fact that they're less likely to be taught them at school as well. So we can see here that across different activities, students in Scotland were less likely to undertake them in lessons. So things like learning about different cultures, learning about how to solve conflicts, given an invitation by teachers to give personal opinion about international news, and we were less likely than students in other cultures to report that we did this at school. However, head teachers were very positive about what was undertaken in school. So, for example, students learning about the histories of diverse cultural groups in Scotland and other countries were above the OECD average. learning about other cultures and diverse cultural groups in their country, and diverse identities, again, very positive. So there could be something here around a kind of wider school learning. So it isn't necessarily in the classroom, but is a wider school thing, whether it's youth groups in school or classes after school or whole school approaches. It could be that that's how it's been taken forward. And I should say as well that the teacher survey was half teachers of English, which is just the way that PISA's put together, and then half a random sample of other teachers. And they're all teachers of 15-year-olds as well. So it's possible that learning came before the student started classes as a 15-year-old. So just quickly, what I'd say was the positives. We had a very high assessment score. We had high awareness of global issues, both in the test and self-awareness. We had a high respect for other cultures and a very positive attitude towards immigrants. Less positively, though we had a lot of respect for other cultures, we had less interest in learning about them. We had comparatively low levels of self-efficacy, and we took fewer actions than students in other cultures. And we also had, we reported fewer learning activities through global competence in classrooms. So a couple of reflections. I'd say this is a positive feedback on the curriculum, and I'll go into more of that in a minute. We can see that we have a good understanding of global issues, but we report that we're less likely than the average to being taught these at school. So is there a wider learning experience for students? Students have respect for other cultures, but below average interest in learning about them. How do we encourage this curiosity? It appears that knowledge of global issues and positive attitudes aren't translating into student action. How can we encourage greater participation? And again, I would say that this was undertaken at the end of 2018, and we had Greta Thunberg in 2019, that might actually have encouraged much greater participation, and it might change if we were to do this again. And lastly, linking this back into the responsible citizens aspects of curriculum for excellence, we can give a big tick for respect for others. I think a partial tick to commitment to participate responsibly, in that we have very positive attitudes, but we like to translate that into more action. A big tick for knowledge and understanding of the world. A big tick for understanding of different beliefs and cultures. This was ability to make informed choices and decisions. I think there's positive evidence towards this. Ability to evaluate different issues, a big tick. And ability to develop informed ethical views of complex issues, again, a big tick. So when we look at global competence compared to curriculum for excellence, I think we can give ourselves probably an 8 out of 10 at least on that. So a very non-scientific way of marking it, but I think it's a positive news story on the whole. So I'll stop sharing my presentation. Sorry, it took a bit longer than I thought, but I'm happy to take any questions or reviews.
Thank you very much, Keith. Do you know, it's always a real delight to hear about all this, the detail comes through PISA, and I think one of the frustrations at times is when the PISA results come out, people are only interested in the big headline numbers and assessment, and there's so much other really valuable, useful information sitting beneath that. So thank you very much for guiding us through that this afternoon. Would anybody like to come in with any questions for Keith and any of the detail you heard? Any questions or any reflections? Or maybe is there anything there that surprised you that you weren't expecting? You can raise your hand if you want to come in, or you can just speak up.
I think it's actually quite a shocker that the girls were less likely to do action and didn't believe in themselves as much as the boys did. I was quite surprised at that, because normally girls are a bit more motivated than boys at getting things done. So for them to be not as, if you like, proactive, that was a bit of a shock for myself. I don't know if anybody else felt that.
Thanks very much for that, Keith.
Sorry, just to come on that. So internationally, girls were less likely to take action, but actually in Scotland, they were more likely than boys to take action. Though Scotland as a whole were less likely internationally to take action. So, girls were more likely than boys to take action, but equally they were less likely to be confident and to show self-efficacy as well. So I think there is a bit of a barrier there for girls, but it is still translating into action more than boys.
Great, thanks. It's really interesting seeing that gender breakdown and the difference across the genders. Abem, would you like to come in with a question or a reflection?
Hi, thanks. I'm not surprised actually at the groups that feel a lack of self-efficacy. I think it mirrors our broader society where men have more power. Maybe that's what girls are seeing then and don't feel that they've got self-efficacy, and also children from poorer backgrounds feeling that they've got less self-efficacy. And I think that again mirrors our broader society, sadly, where people who have got wealth have got more power. I think it's a question of empowerment, and I think really, I think the results are fabulous actually to see it. And Keith, thanks for sharing those results with us, because it gives us the opportunity to see, look, that this is a reflection of our society. I think those results do sadly reflect our society, but having those results maybe lets us start to address that a wee bit more in schools.
Thanks very much there, Keith. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, that's useful comments. Thank you. And I think if I was to take anything away, one of the things would definitely be for girls to, find ways for girls to be encouraged in, I suppose, in their curiosity and taking action and having more confidence in themselves. That's easier said than done, but I think it's really clear that girls have this positive view, but maybe that there's that barrier for them to progress into confidence and taking action. And across PISA, girls do better, but boys are more confident. So I think translating, that positive view and excellent knowledge into, I suppose, combating that fear of failure and confidence is a key one.
Great, thank you for raising that. Abem, that was an important point. Would anybody else like to come in? Any other reflections? I think, Keith, one of the things we discussed in previous sessions was this is a survey and assessment of 15-year-olds, and we need to bear that in mind. So to what extent does this reflect what's going on in our world and as a 15-year-old and maybe senior phase versus what's going on in other aspects of our curriculum, maybe early learning and childcare and primary?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And in some ways, PISA reflects the 5 years of schooling before 15-year-olds, so what they experienced when they were 13 or when they were 12, rather than necessarily just what they're experiencing as they go into senior phase. So yeah, it is quite wide-ranging. So you can read into earlier, so secondary school and even into primary school, and the progress that's been made. And it'd be interesting. There's not the exact questions in the next one, but it'd be interesting to see if there's any movement in terms of what happens next time in PISA.
Great, thanks, Keith. David, did you want to come in? David Maxwell?
Sorry, Ian, you'll be sick of hearing my voice today.
Not at all.
It was that point, something that I've not picked up before when I've heard Keith's presentation, is that point about the teacher questionnaire, that teachers were less likely to include global issues in their learning and to have undertaken professional learning. And I think, I think probably in terms of our role, I would agree with that around professional learning, that we probably haven't offered much professional learning to staff around global issues. And that's probably what I'm trying to come to now from my role now. But it's always interesting, that triangulation of information, because I would think the first bit of that statement, that teachers were less likely to include global issues in their learning, that's not what I see when I'm in schools. I see lots of schools engaging with the United Nations Development Goals, with UNCRC. So from what I see out there, I see more engagement than perhaps that report is telling us. But as Keith says there, it's interesting that it's 15-year-olds and they're probably talking about their journey through school. So things might look a certain way now, but they might have looked a different way over the last 5 years. So I suppose it gives us some food for thought and gives us something to consider as we move forward with professional learning for staff and work in our schools around the global issues. So yeah, it wasn't a question, more a comment, Ian.
That's great, David. Thanks very much for that. And also the point that Keith made is, I think, it's an important one, because 50% of the teachers that responded to this survey were teachers of English in secondary schools. So, you know, to what an extent is this a reflection of the English curriculum and English, teachers of English, as opposed to the wider sort of system as well? So we have to sort of remember that as well. Keith, any points there?
Yeah, just to echo what you just said there, but I suppose it's comparable with the other countries in the respect that they probably had similar number of teachers who were teachers of the main language, whether it's French or Spanish or English. So it maybe isn't as representative of all classrooms in Scotland, but it's still comparable to other countries. There were only 18 countries that took part in the teacher survey, so it is a limited pool. So I suppose the comparison isn't as helpful as it might be. It's more of an insight rather than absolutely representative of all schools and all teachers. And it may also be that in lower secondary they're more likely to include global issues, and maybe they concentrate more on specific subjects, as they go into senior phase. So if you ask 13-year-olds, it might be quite different.
Great, thanks. Annette, did you have your hand up for a while there?
No, I was just going to come in and talk a little bit about the cumulative effect of the work that we've been doing over the years, but also about the notion of cultural intelligence and how that should be permeating our curriculum to engender these conversations with young people about their deeper attitudes. One of the things in one of the tables, in our school, we celebrate festivals, and we know that in looking at the wide range of cultural experiences that we offer in schools, a lot of us stay at that surface level of festivals and food and things that children and young people will see around about them with different cultures and diversity. But we don't go deeper into the attitudes of different cultures and how that impacts on our connection and our engagement with it. So it's just a reminder to me again, I think, about the importance of the nature of cultural intelligence and how we further develop that in our schools.
Thanks, Annette. And Abem, did you want to come back in? Or is that just a legacy hand? Maybe a legacy hand. Okay, any last burning issues for Keith before we move on, looking at learning for sustainability in COP26? Okay, I'll just thank Keith again for your presentation. Keith, I will never tire of hearing about the good news story about our young people in Scotland and how well they did. The fact that we came sort of third, fourth in the world, only after Canada and Singapore, is fantastic. And if MDs get any time, I suggest you look at some of the questions our young people were asked through this survey. I mean, these were really searching questions that needed a real high degree of sort of thinking and complexity in terms of those responses and stuff, and I'm just really personally delighted and impressed with how well our young people in Scotland did, and I'm sure that's in large part to a lot of enthusiasts and passionate people on the call today as well. So a big thank you for the part that you've played in taking all that work forward. So many thanks, Keith, for leading us once again in that. What I'll do is I will present my PowerPoint. I'll just bring this up just now. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes, I can see that.
Great, that's fantastic. So learning for sustainability, I'm sure many people in the call are very familiar with learning for sustainability. Is learning for sustainability is learning for a better world. It brings together all of these different aspects of our learning. You'll see in this on this word cloud here, the outdoor learning, sustainable development education, global citizenship are enlarged on this word, and that's because they're the three pillars that underpin learning for sustainability. But it's also about respect. It's about problem solving. It's about peace and conflict, social justice, and so many other things is referenced here. And I know many people find this helpful to understand the connections across all these different areas, and as they take forward things in their settings in schools, to really bring those connections to life and to look at the balance they've got across this learning for sustainability agenda. Many of you know as well that learning for sustainability, the term dates from this report, the report of the One Planet Schools Working Group. Interestingly, when the world leaders sit down in Glasgow on the 1st of November, this report will be exactly 10 years old to the day. So that's a happy coincidence there. And these are the 5 big strategic actions or recommendations that came from this report. Very much that learning for sustainability is an entitlement for all learners. We want every practitioner to demonstrate it in their practice, every school and setting to pursue a whole school community approach, and for buildings and grounds to reflect the principles of LFS, and also a strategic national approach. They've been reflected to in the Vision 2030 Plus document, which is the report of the implementation group. And that's called Vision 2030 because that's the report taking us through to 2030, which is the delivery date or the target date for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There's also a new action plan that came out just last year around the Vision 2030 report outlining maybe some more detailed actions we're going to be taking nationally to secure the implementation of learning for sustainability. But many people maybe don't understand that learning for sustainability was embedded in Curriculum for Excellence right from the word go. It's not a new thing. So if you look at the entitlements within building the Curriculum 3, which are reflected in their new Scotland's curriculum narrative, it's very much about a broad general education, which includes understanding of the world, Scotland's place in it, and environment. And of course, we now refer to that as learning for sustainability, but it wasn't referred to that at the time. And we've worked really hard through the implementation group and beyond to make sure that we give this agenda a really fair wind. We remove the barriers, we remove the things that were maybe inhibiting progress. And so learning for sustainability is very clearly outlined and articulated as an entitlement within How Good Is Our School 4 and permeates the equality indicators there. It's also world leading for Scotland that we have embedded it within our professional standards for our practitioners, and that's a new professional guide that's been issued by the General Teaching Council of Scotland. And also really pleased just last year, SQA issued this statement that they will seek to embed learning for sustainability in all new qualifications that are developed from now on. So across Education Scotland's work, the GT General Teaching Council and SQA, there's a very firm commitment there. And there's a wider policy landscape. You know, the First Minister has made clear we were one of the first countries in the world to sign up to the United Nations Development Goals. We're one of the first countries to declare a climate emergency. So at the very highest level in Scotland, we've got world-leading climate change targets as well. There's a very strong commitment, which I think reinforces what we're trying to do within schools and the curriculum. And I don't know if you know as well, but this is a national performance framework which underpins all aspects of government in Scotland. And you can see that all of these ambitions for our society, for our nation, are reflected in the Sustainable Development Goals, or aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. And I've spoken to, in conferences out with Scotland, other nations, and they're literally green with envy by the way that we've embedded this within our society and within our government. And the thing I love about this slide, it's almost like a stick of rock. If you cut Scotland through the middle like a stick of rock, learning for sustainability and the Sustainable Development Goals would be all the way through. So just a wee pause from me just now. So, is this news to you? Are you very familiar with these commitments and this policy landscape? And to what extent has our commitment to learning for sustainability over the last 10 years been reflected in the PISA Global Competence findings? Would anybody like to come in?
Ian, I've just got a reflection on the fact that it's that the GTCS document that you showed there, that commitment of the General Teaching Council to have it embedded within the new refreshed standards that are going to be enacted from August this year. I think it's just to really reinforce what you said, it's a commitment, a national commitment for a profession actually to take it forward. And maybe I think, I don't know now because I'm not in schools enough in terms of those first couple of questions there, but certainly that provides an opportunity to actually make practitioners more aware and involved and engaged with it.
Absolutely, Alison. I think it's a great opportunity, and again, it's world leading. You know, we've embedded in our professional standards and the commitment to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child as well. So we're in a really fortunate position. I know other countries are really interested in that. Sorry, Annie, I just saw you posted a message in the chat there about the recording this session. Yep, that's great to hear.
Yeah, and we'll post it on the PLL Learn page. Lee's just about to, as we speak, put the link to that in for participants so that they can go back. It was in response to Claire's comment about notes to share with colleagues, so that the work will be there for people to share it as widely as they wish.
And I'm the one to come in on that point. You know, to what extent do the really good results that we've seen in the PISA findings, to what extent has been that because of the work we've done in learning for sustainability over the last 10 years, or just because it's our values as a nation? It's just part of our psyche, you know, that maybe commitment to social justice. And I think Keith has mentioned that PISA is very good at making us ask a lot of questions. It doesn't always tell us the answers as to why, really. Anybody else want to come in, share any reflections, or will we move on? Okay, we'll move on then. So I suppose in terms of the way forward, we've got at the top of this slide, hashtag time for LFS, hashtag this is LFS. Those are the hashtags we use in our Learning for Sustainability Twitter account. And if ever there was a time for us to focus and make learning for sustainability a priority, surely it's now. We've got Scottish Parliament elections coming up in the next few months, and in my own household, I've got 2 young people voting for the first time. So how are we preparing our young people to make decisions about voting and about the process and how they go about that? How do we help them understand all the issues which, you know, will come up in those elections, and help develop really informed views about them? We've seen a lot in the news about the situation in America over the last few years, about you know, challenges to democracy, about fake news, about the impact of social media. We're seeing that playing out in Australia just now with Facebook. Big questions for us about information bias, about how we develop informed decisions, and about political literacy. We've got Brexit coming up, big challenges for us as a nation as we get to grips with Brexit and the implications of that, and all the arguments for and against. COVID has rocked our world this last year and caused so much trauma and destruction, but there's been new ways of doing things in there, you know, such as we're doing just now in terms of connecting digitally. So what's the implications for a society as we move forward and as we recover from COVID? In biodiversity, there's going to be an enormous biodiversity conference, United Nations Biodiversity Conference in China in May. So there's going to be a lot of media attention around biodiversity. And of course, there's been a huge profile around David Attenborough, plastic pollution in our oceans and so on, which we know that many young people are really connected to. So how are we helping our young people make sense of all of this and engage with all of this? In some cases, young people will be anxious. In other cases, many young people will just be switching off, zoning out. Many young people are not watching news these days or TV, so they'll be missing out on all of this. And again, that's a big issue for us in itself. And then after COVID, this is my favourite experience and outcome. Obviously, I lead on the science curriculum as well, so it has to be a science experience and outcome. After COVID, we know that young people, many of us have been locked up in our houses, cut off from friends and family, Many of us have maybe experienced nature in a way we've never done before, but we know that outdoor learning is going to have to be a bigger part of the picture this year because of COVID and our desire to sort of mitigate the transmission of COVID. So outdoor learning is an important part of this equation too. And of course, that's embedded in entitlement to learning for sustainability as well. Daily contact with nature. When can we ever remember young people going on strike from school? You know, these are unprecedented times, and young people in Scotland have joined forces with the National Union of Students to create the Teacher Future campaign, and they're interacting and meeting with John Swinney regularly and the First Minister. Big demands. They want every teacher in the UK to be given professional learning around climate change and for it to be embedded in the curriculum and inspections. So how are we meeting those demands for our young people? And then almost at the bookend of this year, there's a COP26 summit in Glasgow. 200 world leaders coming to our shores, just 2 kilometres from where I'm sitting just now. 30,000 delegates, one of the biggest events of its kind. At the same time, the Scottish Government is really pushing forward on this green recovery and investing £100 million in the Green Jobs Fund. How can we make the most of this? So we've got a whole year of opportunities to focus on learning for sustainability. With COP26, a big focus for us at the end of that. And helping young people understand it's not just about recycling, it's not just about biodiversity and bees, but it's actually about jobs, it's about economy, and it's about the future of Scotland and our ability to make the transition to net zero by 2045. Green jobs are very much about science jobs and STEM jobs, but other jobs as well. So there's big opportunities in there. And talking about the greening of the curriculum, so this is our Scotland's curriculum slide. If we're going to green our economy, if we're going to have a green recovery nationally, then how is that reflected in our curriculum? How are we greening the curriculum as part of that? And how are we preparing young people for life in the 21st century with all the challenges that we've just spoken about? So just another brief pause. How can we use, when the world leaders come to Glasgow, to the SECC in Glasgow in 1st of November, how can we use that as an opportunity to create an irresistible curriculum this year? And I've put recovery in a different font colour because maybe we don't want to recover and go back the way. Maybe this is about looking forward. But, to what extent can learning for sustainability give us that real fabulous bounce in terms of an irresistible curriculum? Would anybody like to come in or share any reflections?
Well, I think from the just recent events from the pandemic and COVID-19 and things like that, I think that's given our young people a bit more of a global, because it's a global issue, and I think they're going to be more inclined to be looking at other countries and seeing how they're doing different things just in light of the pandemic. So hopefully we can keep that curiosity and that same kind of passion, that they're interested in what's going on and how other countries are coping, but also what they do, with other things. Hopefully we can keep that going, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm explaining myself very well, but yeah, is what I'm trying to say is basically, that we've given our kids a bit of a taster of what's going on globally, and hopefully we can sustain that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really important point. And COVID has shown us more than anything else how interconnected we all are. There was a big report on, I think, Channel 4 News last night about the situation in Brazil. And unless, we get the COVID situation in Brazil under control, there's a big danger about new variants circulating the world again. And so we're in this together. They can't be looking after ourselves. It's got to be an absolute global approach, seen as one global system, all interconnected. That's a really good point. So thanks, Claire. Claire's put in the chat, I think in primary, through really engaging in rich ideal opportunities with a focus and excitement in the run-up to COP26. I think there's massive opportunities in there, Claire. I know you do a lot in your school in this regard, in terms of interdisciplinary learning, project-based learning, really exciting approaches to learning. Teachers and schools have worked really, really hard this year in terms of digital learning in this whole new world. And I think it's really underlined the importance for all of us about the importance of getting that curriculum offer right and really exciting and motivating young people in their learning. So thanks for that, Claire. Any other points or reflections? Okay, I'll just move on just the last couple of slides. Coming back to the points Keith made, the big question for me and the thing for all of us is, how can we use this opportunity this year to tackle the things on the right-hand side, the self-efficacy, giving young people a chance to take action, really enhance the learning activities taking place in the classroom and interest in other cultures. So whatever we're doing for COP26 this year, I think we've got some big targets there. 2014, we used the Commonwealth Games as an inspirational focus for learning. So we're working hard in Education Scotland just now to think how we can use COP26 in a similar way. How can we learn from all the lessons from the Commonwealth Games to really use this as an inspirational focus for learning and do some really exciting things collectively across Scotland, working in partnership with local authorities and schools and regional improvement collaboratives. And as with Commonwealth Games, we need to start thinking now about the legacy. This is not just about a big one-off event in November. This is about how we use this as a springboard to a whole, 3-year programme, 5-year, 10-year programme of action, where we're meeting some of those big recommendations in the Vision 2030 report around entitlement, but we're also building understanding of climate change and green jobs and skills, and we want youth voice to be front and centre and really to share our practice globally. And I'll just flag up, if that's part of your journey or what your ambition is this year, we've got our whole school self-evaluation framework on a National Improvement Hub. We've got a long version for all the keen beans. I'm sure there's a few keen beans in the call today. And we've also got a summary page, a summary version, which is only 2 sides of A4. So if you want to change your school and develop your school into an effective whole school approach to LFS, and you want to make real progress, we can change the world in 2 sides of A4. Just go for the summary version. That's a great place to start. And Sustainable Scotland, this is a new programme developed by eSchool, Keep Scotland Beautiful and West Online Schools. So there's live lesson support through that programme just now. We're into week 2 of that, and it's been offered at 2nd and 3rd level. So please make sure you engage with that as a great place to start with right away. And we've also set up a new national practitioner network on MS Teams and Glow. There's a link to that. It's just been set up in the last couple of weeks, so it's quite new. There's not a lot of stuff on there, but we really want people to come in there, connect, share, comment, network, support one another, share resources. And at the end of this year, if we've got a really vibrant network on that Teams group, then that will certainly be a big legacy. So thank you, everybody. We've only got a minute or so left. Does anybody want to come in with any questions or reflections before we finish?
Thanks, Ian. That was fantastic. I'd like to thank both you and Keith for your time this afternoon and taking us through some really important thinking and reflection for us as we go forward through this year. The PISA work's always fascinating, but seeing that level of breakdown and detail is so important for schools to take things forward. As I mentioned earlier, Lee's put a link in the chat, not the one I was hoping at that point, my apologies, but a link to the evaluation for our international series. So if you have a moment to fill in that in, I'd be very grateful. Also to let you know that we have 2 more international events this month. We have Andy Hargreaves and Alison Skerritt looking at ethical leadership on the 22nd of March. And we have Trevor Mackenzie from Vancouver on the 24th of March, looking at teacher inquiry and leading teacher inquiry in a creative way as part of the Education Scotland Creative Leadership and Learning Week. So there's lots of interesting things coming up over the course of this month if you have the time for an odd hour here and there. And you can sign up for all of these on Eventbrite on the Education Scotland PLL events page. So thank you so much for sparing the time to join us today. I hope it's been a benefit to you and will spark some conversations in your schools around these areas. Thanks so much. Safe home, and we'll see you again soon, hopefully. Bye-bye.